excluded from decision-making processes. And we also know that there's various anthropogenic impacts on the environment, and they're placing increasing pressure on the coastal waters and seas in the UK. And they include pollution, habitat destruction, as well as overfishing. And these anthropogenic activities are not just affecting ocean health, but they're also affecting the services that are provided by the ocean. And this is therefore will have an impact on our human health. And overall, we really wanted to have a better understanding of the connection between human health and ocean health, and how these anthropogenic activities might affect human health now and in the future. And we were also interested in this topic from a public health perspective. So we know that in the UK, we're facing various public health challenges. For example, 25% or 1 in 4 people experience mental health problems each year. And also 3 out of every 5 people in the UK, or 60%, are overweight or obese. And there's been a growing acknowledgement of the importance of green prescribing. And actually it was highlighted in the 25-year plan for the environment. And green prescribing involves using green spaces and nature-based interventions to treat people with health conditions. For example, they may prescribe gardening, conservation, care farms, as well as green gyms. But there's now interest in blue prescribing and how the marine and coastal environment might be used alongside green spaces. We really needed more evidence to better understand the benefits of marine and coastal environments in the UK. So overall, the evidence statement aimed to answer 2 questions. So firstly, do people gain benefits from exposure to marine and coastal environments? And in this case, we're really interested in 2 types of exposure. The first was neighbourhood exposure, so does living by the sea increase human health? And secondly, visit-based exposure. Does visiting the sea have benefits for human health? And the second question was, are there risks to the benefits provided by the marine and coastal environment? So how might climate change and pollution and extreme weather, how might these affect these human health benefits? And for this evidence statement, we defined human health as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And for this project, we use a quick scoping review to review the evidence. And we really wanted to focus on the oceans and human health in the UK. And you can see our search terms here. This is what we put into our search database. And we overall identified 1,815 articles, and we then reviewed them and narrowed them down. And we found that 46 of these articles were relevant to the evidence statement. And additional references were also fed into the process by a steering group who were involved in the project. So overall, we synthesised all the evidence, and this enabled us to answer the questions I discussed a moment ago. So I want to talk you through some of the findings of the study. So the first question was, do people gain benefits from exposure to marine and coastal environments? And the answer is yes. So the evidence suggested that living near to or visiting the marine and coastal environment in the UK can affect people's physical health, their mental health, and their well-being. And so firstly, we looked at the benefits to mental health and well-being, and the evidence suggested that the coast plays a role as a therapeutic and restorative landscape for promoting well-being and mental health. So overall, environments such as beaches, rocky shores, and coastlines, they provide opportunities for stress reduction, for individuals to lose themselves, as well as provide them with the ability to relax and to reflect. And I'm also going to talk you through a few of the studies that we identified. So one research study showed that people are happiest when spending time in marine and coastal margins. And marine and coastal environments are by some distance the happiest locations. And this is when you compare them to urban environments, as well as green spaces such as mountains, moors, and woodlands. And here you can see a picture of me very much enjoying my time within a marine and coastal environment. And we also identified that people living within 1 kilometre of the coast had lower mental distress compared to people living over 5 kilometres away. So living closer to the coast can increase your mental health and well-being. So there were only not just impacts on mental health and well-being, but there were also benefits to physical health. So living close to and visiting marine and coastal environments was shown to benefit people's general health and also to increase physical activity. Again, I'll talk you through a few of the studies. So one of the studies we found showed that that coastal residents are more likely to achieve recommended levels of physical activity. And this is when you compare people living within 1 kilometre of the coast to people living 20 kilometres away. And a few studies identified this link between the coasts and physical activity. And this has previously been described as the blue gym effect. We also saw that visits to marine and coastal environments are associated with more energy expenditure. This is when you compare them to other environments such as the countryside, as well as urban green spaces. And this is because of the relatively long duration of visits to coastal and marine environments. So on average, we found that people spend approximately 40 to 52 minutes longer in seaside resorts compared to the countryside, as well as urban green spaces. So people spend longer in seaside resorts and therefore they expend more energy. Another study found that coastal environments and coastal climates provide more favourable conditions for vitamin D synthesis. So there was a 3 to 5 nanomoles per litre difference between coastal residents and those living at around 50 kilometres inland. So to summarise, people living by the coast had higher vitamin D levels compared to those people living 50 kilometres away from the coast. This is really important because vitamin D levels help to regulate the amount of calcium and phosphate in the body. Therefore, it's needed to keep bones, teeth, and muscles healthy. So again, another coastal effect there in terms of vitamin D. And we also aim to address the second question. So are there risks to the benefits provided by the marine and coastal environment? And unfortunately, the answer was yes. Although there's less evidence on the risk to these benefits, initial research suggests that environmental and social change now and in the future may result in loss to some of these benefits associated with living near to or visiting marine and coastal environments. And overall, we found there were 3 main risk factors that may affect health and well-being benefits gained from the marine and coastal environment. So the first was pollution. This includes air and water pollution. The second was climate change and extreme weather, which is very topical based on the week of COP26. And the third risk factor was socio-economic and cultural change. So, for example, inappropriate development of the marine and coastal environment, which may impact health and well-being of local communities. And we found these 3 risk factors may directly impact human health. So, for example, if you're swimming in the sea and you end up with stomach upset due to sewage outfall, that's a direct health impact. But these risks could also have an indirect impact. So, for example, the risk may cause people to visit the marine and coastal environment less. So, for example, if there's some pollution in the water, people may not want to visit, therefore there'll be a reduction in visits to the marine and coastal environment. It also may occur through an indirect effect. So these risks, when these risks are not considered or planned for or mitigated against in terms of planning. So for example, if a local authority does not plan for the impacts of climate change on a coastal area, that may have an indirect impact on human health. And finally, these risks may result in coastal community fragmentation. So for example, if you have flooding in an area, this may mean that people have to move away from this area, relocate, and that may cause a disruption to that coastal community, result in a loss of those social connections, and therefore social capital. So as you can see, there's a mixture of direct and indirect impacts that these risks can have on health and well-being. So I want to draw out a few of these examples. So firstly, I want to talk about water pollution. And people can be exposed to water pollution through direct skin contact, aerosol contact, as well as incidental ingestion, which can occur during bathing and undertaking water sports. And there are a range of different pollutants within UK waters. They can be man-made or human-mediated, for example, oil, heavy metals, and plastics. And they might be naturally occurring contaminants, for example, bacteria, viruses, and harmful algal blooms. And just in the case of harmful algal blooms, you can see some pictures of them here off the UK coast. And they occur when colonies of algae grow out of control and produce toxic or harmful effects on people, as well as fish, shellfish, marine mammals, and birds. And in terms of human health, they can have a variety of effects, including toxicity, and they may cause acute and chronic illness. So, for example, gastrointestinal issues, respiratory issues, and dermatological diseases. And they may also affect well-being and physical activity, because it may kind of distract or reduce people's interaction with the ocean. And it also may cause deteriorations in terms of people's enjoyment of the sea. So, for example, they may not get the same feeling of relaxation and revitalization when they're looking at a sea with a harmful algal bloom. Another example that I mentioned was climate change and extreme weather. And the Committee on Climate Change has identified the long-term health and well-being impacts of flooding are considerable. And their models suggest that around 910,000 properties in England and Wales are at significant risk of tidal flooding by 2080. And this may cause a range of potential impacts. For example, it may mean that some communities have to relocate. It may cause coastal flooding-induced mental health impacts. It may cause coastal community fragmentation, like I mentioned, people moving away and causing a breakdown in that community. And it may also result in less visits to coastal areas for leisure and recreation. So as you can kind of see from these results, we found a range of different connections between the ocean and human health, and also we identified a number of the risks these benefits. We also identified that there were a number of research gaps, and I want to talk to you about two of these today. So firstly, there was limited evidence on the risks to the benefits provided by marine and coastal environments. And also there was less evidence on how we mitigate against these impacts. For example, how do we mitigate against the effects of climate change and extreme weather? And secondly, there was limited evidence on the impacts of interventions on physical health, mental health, and well-being. So for example, how does increasing access to the coast or designating a marine protected area, how does that affect human health and well-being? And I want to talk about a little bit about marine protected areas because they're my passion, but I know that it might be in the interest of everyone at the MBA as well. So we did find that there were some indications of a link between marine protected areas and well-being, but so far the evidence base is quite small. So we did find from the evidence base that people visiting designated areas or protected areas have higher well-being than those visiting environments that aren't protected, and that was really interesting. So people reported being more calm, revitalized, and relaxed in coastal locations with designated status, for example, coastal reserves. And there's also evidence that suggests that recreational divers and anglers have gained well-being benefits from the network of marine protected areas in the UK. So from this research, they found that anglers and divers were shown to have higher well-being when they were diving or angling in areas which had species of conservation interest, for example, the long-snouted seahorse and the native oyster. And they also had higher well-being in areas that had wrecks and eelgrass beds. But as I mentioned, there isn't sufficient evidence, and we also need more robust designs to better assess the effect of marine protected areas on human health. And this would involve extensive evaluation and long-term monitoring programs. And that gives a better idea of the extent to which they affect human health. So overall, to conclude, so humans are inextricably linked to and are reliant on the ocean, and we've seen that in the UK. The evidence suggests that marine and coastal environments have positive effects on physical health, mental health, and well-being. However, there are a number of risks to these benefits, including climate change, extreme weather, and water pollution. And finally, there are a number of evidence gaps. Overall, we need to have a better understanding of how these risks will affect human health now and in the future. And also, we need to better evaluate how different interventions affect human health. For example, how do marine protected areas impact human health and well-being? So before I finish, I just really want to say thank you to DEFRA for hosting me during my internship, in addition to my funders, UKRI and NERC, and also my PhD institutions, the University of Exeter and Plymouth Marine Laboratory. And I want to give a special thanks to Rosanna Mann, Alice Milner, and various steering group members from across different institutions in the UK. And I've given you a bit of a snapshot into the evidence statement, but you can find out more by reading the evidence statement online. And I think Jack's going to post that link in the chat box for you all to access. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.